Many of our conversations when determining how we're going to be approaching the week's worth of work, the month's worth of work, we discuss what sites we're actively working. And what's unique about Seafarer is that we're actively working multiple sites while additionally collecting data and surveying areas beyond the sites that we're currently working. So let's say we get to the point where the mag data, the sonar data, and some diver verification has agreed that there is an area that we need to spend more time on, further explore. That's when the SeaSearcher is coming out. We wait for the best weather conditions, as that's one of the limiting factors. And we get to the point where we're ready to take it out. So we get here into the lab, we load up all of the equipment that we're going to be using for the day, the SeaSearcher, and then all of the various aspects to it. We have it modular, so everything is right now set up in Pelican cases that we can then bring out onto the boat, set up so it can be, any boat can be outfitted with the SeaSearcher in our fleet. So it's not a single boat that needs to be used, it could be any of our boats. We take all of the equipment out, we load it up in the early morning and head out to site, whichever site that we're working. It takes maybe a half hour to 45 minutes to set everything up, run through our tests on the boat, make sure all of our systems are still running efficiently. At this point, we're ready to deploy it in the water. There's coordination between the captain and the pilot as to the location that it needs to be deployed. And this can change based on several factors. This could be the wind, the current, the sea state if there's a surge at the bottom. All of this can affect where we're going to be deploying the SeaSearcher and how we're going to be running the scan that day. At this point, we then deploy it in the water, and it's up to the pilot to maintain the survey, to run through the survey as efficiently as possible. Typically, it will take between 4 to 6 hours to survey an area that we're looking to cover. So while we're piloting the SeaSearcher and collecting data, we get a certain amount of real-time information back that'll tell us targets, target sizes, their depth in the sand, and it's also storing all of this data, both on the unit and on the laptop. We'll conduct the entire survey, bring the SeaSearcher up to the boat, and take it back to the lab. That's at the point where we offload the data and get it to one of our software engineers who processes the data to give us all of that vital information. So for an item to be recovered, certain steps must take place. Typically the dive team will be searching a target, either a SeaSearcher target, a mag target, various target of some sort. They'll be circle searching, metal detecting, and uncovering the target. They first have to make sure they're staying within whatever state guidelines, state regulations there are, if it's within one of those areas. If it's in an Admiralty arrest or outside of 3 miles, it's handled slightly differently. But they get to the point where they're able to recover an artifact, and they first have to photograph it, measure it, document it in situ, and then report back before they're able to bring it up. They get a hold of us, one of the project managers or the archaeologists, and they get approval to bring the item back up to the surface. They'll then bring the item up and store it in a stable environment. Typically it's a bin filled with salt water to keep it in as close to the same environment as possible while it's transported back to the conservation lab. Then they sign off paperwork, hand it over to the conservator, and they will take over from there. At that point, they need to make sure the item is under stable conditions. They'll x-ray the item, they'll keep it stored in water to try and leach out as much of that salt as possible. The issue is, especially with iron objects, the salt, when the item dries, will recrystallize and the items will disintegrate. So a lot of what the conservation team has to do is prevent that from happening while keeping it as stabilized as possible. They then analyze the items themselves and give us information on the historical context of those items. And a lot of this can be done, which influences how we're going to be conducting our further exploration out there. If they're telling us a certain item could be found on a various part of the ship, we may have an idea as to what portion of the ship we're looking at and conduct our further exploration accordingly.